Hello and welcome. This is Gerd Mellak from SEOleverage.com. You're listening to episode number 16. And while we very often focus on online businesses, e-commerce, today we're going to break it down to a more local level. And I'm really happy to invite to have on the show John Vuong today, who is a local SEO expert focused on local SEO for local businesses. Welcome, John. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, Gert. I'm excited. I've been following you for a little bit and excited to be on your show today.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to have you because local SEO, and we are going to see this in the course of our conversation, I'm sure, has a much bigger impact also on online businesses, not only local businesses. But I don't want to take too much away right now. Could you give our listeners a little bit of an intro about where you come from? What's your access? How do you come to local SEO specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So my backstory began, I started this agency 8 years ago. So back in 2013 is when I began, bootstrapped it, didn't really know anything about SEO. But prior to starting this agency, I was in advertising sales for 10 years and doing traditional advertising sales, print media, as well as online affiliate. I stayed at a fairly large company, and you probably heard and your audience members know of Yellow Pages. And I was there for 5 years. And that's where I really harvested and learned a lot about running business, because I dealt with thousands of small business owners and understood what really mattered and resonated for them. So I connected on a more personal level, relationship building, and really understood like what was important to them, mainly to support their family and community, and understanding how to run a real solid foundational business. Really set me up to when I was ready to start my own. So the last couple of years while working at Yellow Pages, you knew there was a shift. The user intent behavior was changing. No longer did they consume that printed format to then consuming on digital platforms. And Google became the prominent place. It became the dominant monopoly in terms of the digital world. And search became more of a go-to place for businesses who wanted to be in front of potential customers seeking out their product and service. So I just had to understand how Google operated, the algorithm. I didn't really know much about technical digital at that point. I knew a lot of sales. I knew customers needed someone they can trust. And I wanted to be that middle person or that company to transition them away from traditional to digital. And I figured it out after a couple of years, a lot of mistakes, a lot of, hiring, firing mistakes, and just got a good rhythm, good process now. And I feel very confident talking and speaking and informing others about what we can do for customers.
Sounds good. It's funny you bring up Yellow Pages because the backstory of our brand of SEO Leverage really began on a very similar level. We had been doing a lot of programming, a lot of online marketing, lead generation, and things like those before I really shifted towards SEO. And we came through a period where Yellow Pages, I was already based in Madrid, I think, in Spain. I remember a lot of companies were paying a big amount of money to Yellow Pages just for them to build up some local pages, really locally optimized pages. But Yellow Pages was still like the first go-to place unless you already had an agency advising you differently. But we started really on a local level. It was interesting. So we did a local office refurbishment company, the local car repair store, not only with local SEO, but also then Google Ads and stuff. So we very often came from a same level. And then I agree there was a big shift going on also when talking to clients that they said, yeah, we used to pay, I think it was like $3,000 a year back then to Yellow Pages here in Spain, which was a lot of money here. And there was a shift where people started trying to get their own setup, their own site going and be a little bit independent of those big annual subscriptions. And definitely saw that more and more people were just relying on Google. Nobody clicked on the Yellow Pages, which did come up back then as one of the most important search results on the top. There were the Yellow Pages essentially. So Google definitely gave them a lot of credit. in the past. Let me ask you something. In the last 2 years or so, have you seen local SEO change?
Um, there has been changes
Mm-hmm.
on a level that where organic SEO was prominent on links and content and UX. There's been a major shift towards that because now these larger brands are shifting towards more local, and they're competing with the local players that don't have the same amount of budget. And they're bringing to it a lot of link building and a lot of other larger ticket item strategies that a lot of local players can't afford to implement on their own strategy. So we have to be way more creative than ever to compete with the larger brands.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely an interesting point. So larger brands, we've seen this as well with, especially in e-commerce, where you see large brands suddenly targeting really small locations, neighborhoods, etc. Where you say, okay, they also figured it out. It's not only the big search volumes that's interesting, but there is a value in adding up small location pages and small lower search volumes that in sum, with the power you mentioned, the investment power they have, can then really add up. We are very focused on a content-driven approach in SEO. I know some agencies focus only on links, some agencies focus on only citations. Where do you see content when it comes to local SEO?
Content is very important. So is UX. So is journey, navigation. So is I would say links, citation building, directory submission. There's the foundations, right? And I still boil it down to, as a business owner, you need to know how to run a business. You need to know how to pick up the phone. If there's a lead that comes in, what happens? If you don't know that fundamentals, no matter what SEO campaign that's driven, you're not going to have the success that you believe it's going to bring you, right? So even with a local standpoint, I feel business owners need to understand, and because I learned this a lot at Yellow Pages, it takes years to learn how to run a business. It doesn't take weeks, months, a couple years. Like a lot of things that you learn digitally now, a lot of the nomads, a lot of the younger 20 millennials, I would say, right? They feel that with technology comes speed, and they feel they can get things up running really quickly. Yes, there's different platforms, different stack softwares for different purposes. But my type of client are still the small, medium-sized businesses because I resonate with them. I connect with them on a personal level. I really want to help them become, inspiration and support their community. So depending on your focus, right? I feel as a local SEO agency, we feel there's still a gap in opportunity to compete with the bigger brands because of, even though the low search volume, low traffic, way higher conversion rate, higher, if done right, it's going to cultivate the type of nurturing and lead source that you want in your ideal type of client. And in the realm of SEO, it's not all about traffic. It's about conversion rate. It's about quality. And if you believe in running a good campaign, that's what you should ultimately go after and fine tune so that you can make use of your resources so that it can give you the best output.
Interesting. I still need to pinpoint you a little bit on the content aspect, because it's something we teach our clients in the Erica consulting we have, where we walk them through a framework we have come up with, published a book around this. Content is just really something that seems to matter a lot. Google needs obviously content to rank aside. Now, the phone number and address alone is not going to rank for a certain business name. So you understand in local SEO, would there be an advice you could give people where you say, okay, when it comes to content creation and your business is somewhat a local business, or there is a local intent coming, is there anything in particular you could give them as an advice to take into account? Most of our clients, by the way, create their own content or have their team, their writers, and they create this content based on our instructions. What would you say to them?
So very similar. Content is very pivotal in terms of foundation, right? So who do you want to be known as an expert? But then really drive home, like, what kind of purpose of content? Is it navigational, transactional? Is it, informational? Different purposes based on the journey of the client. And then you got to figure out like answering all the questions that your ideal customer has, right? Like that persona, avatar, understanding what they're asking, the who, what, why, when, where, how. Figure out all those really, really detailed questions, answer and make it easy for customers so that you can really just focus on that transaction, right? Focus on honing down on your expertise so that it makes it easier for them to not call you with questions. But in terms of the local level, a lot of business owners don't understand marketing and sales. They understand how maybe to run a business, but they have all these dreams and they see their competitor and they think, well, they feel they're way better than them, no matter what industry, no matter what business. Right. But they don't understand what it takes, right, to get there. They don't know their back history. They have no idea what went on in their circumstance or whatever. So just being real with people, give them a real perspective, laying down the foundation, the steps, this process, and then understanding like how to differentiate. What's a go-to strategy, market? And I really focus on, in terms of local, making sure that they dominate their space. And as much as the competitors have their competitive edge or whatever they think they know that they're dominant for, we have software to detect which keywords they're actually ranking for, right? Mm-hmm. We actually have, a lot of the stack that a lot of people don't know what's going on, right? In the back end, what links, what are the content relevancy, what's the trust flow, what, everything, right? How long people stay on certain pages. We can detect all that and then give them a more informed, educated decision on, they're not really competitors if you're focused on this as your key go-to-market. These are your competitors, right? And then give them more clear vision on what you should be putting in your content and creating good, compelling content. Focus more on their goals and their aspirations as opposed to others. So stop comparing, focus on what they want. Because a lot of people compare, right? They're like, oh, they see all this nice website. They see all these people working for these other companies. It's great that they were able to do it. Focus on what you want as a business owner.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So essentially what you're saying is that content obviously depends on what stage someone is in. If they're exploring the topic, if they're ready to buy, queries are going to be different. Content they are looking for is going to be different. And then what I'm hearing is that there is value in competitive research, not necessarily looking at your competitor and doing things exactly the same, but checking out what is working for a competitor, where are they ranking, what can we do from our perspective. Everybody, just initially before we hit record, talking about every agency approaches things a little bit differently, right? We all want to rank for the same topics probably, but we have probably our own approach. So we definitely want to know what competitors are doing, but we want to then interpret it based on what we want to achieve for our business. What's the best thing for our clients? I think this very much resonates to what we're doing here with the E from Erika with the evolution, where we say, okay, where are competitors? What's working for them? What can we leverage? I remember a case, for example, where we're checking out a competitor from one of our clients in the online learning space. And we just discovered an early warning sign where they were losing traffic. Okay, so they just lost traffic. We figured out what was the keyword, what was the ranking they were losing. We checked it out. It was really purely based on user experience. Those poor guys just didn't see this URL coming, I think. Everybody else, all the other competitors, we jumped at it really, and they lost completely. They lost page one. Everybody else tried to jump at it as soon as possible, make things better, approach things from the level Google users apparently were looking for, or which made Google users happy, which ultimately is what we're trying to do. So that's really, really interesting. A big topic that always comes up in SEO is relevance. So things, sites, pages, results need to be relevant. What's your interpretation of relevance?
For sure. Relevance, proximity, it's all about making sure that if you're going to be a expert in whatever field it is, expertise, authoritative figure, you need to be a thought leader, right? Someone that knows what they're talking about, provide good depth, well-researched information on your blog, newsletter, whatever, on other posts. And other people need to know that you know your stuff, just like any expertise, right? You've been doing SEO for a while, myself now a couple more years. It's more like, look, I feel that I know what I'm kind of talking about today versus when you're first starting off. So relevance is all about experience, like credentials, right? Just like when you're a dentist, you don't just become a dentist. You spend 20 years in school with, designation, with training, apprenticeship, working for some other practices. Then you can say, I have 20 years of experience, right? In terms of like relevant is, I feel you have to be someone of a status to then speak on that subject matter. Without that, it's very difficult for you to gain traction.
So this means you understand relevance more as some sort of authority. Is this correct?
Yes.
But
so relevance also plays in terms of location and niche specific associations and
I was going to say, it's probably I would personally probably see it a little bit broader, where I say, okay, if it's a service business, in your case with local SEO, obviously we are very tied to businesses who need to be the expert in their area or need to be the authority in their area. With SEO, especially when we talk about online businesses, e-commerce, etc., very often it comes down really to topic relevance as well. So I think there were probably different geographic relevance, topic relevance. I remember when we did link building, I think we started link building probably like 12 years ago or something like that. And I remember one of my first clients, which was a big agency from Germany, hired us for links. And they said, yeah, whatever link you create and report, you need to be able to defend it. Okay, and this was an interesting request from this client, because they knew you could create very quickly a lot of links, but defending a link means it must be relevant. It must be either geographically relevant, it must be topics related relevant, it needs to have relevance overall in the entire link profile. So I think relevance, very often when we talk about this in the team, we very often say, okay, what makes the search user happy is a relevant search result. Not sure if this probably is the best definition I could come up with. There's probably betters out there, but it essentially, what it tells us is that for a certain search user, based on all those factors, their location, their search history, as a relevant search engine result is very different. If you search for how old is Obama and you get their age, and you then put a search into this and his wife, this is going to trigger Obama's wife, because Google knows that for you in this specific moment, relevance is a completely different thing than for someone else just typing in and his wife, where Google has no idea what the search intent could possibly be. So very often we see relevance in context, and especially for local businesses, relevance, very often we see it tied to their surrounding other businesses in their area, maybe other institutions, schools, etc. So I think this is definitely a big topic. But you also touched upon authority, and I just was speaking on a podcast about EAT, so expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. Is this a topic you see in local SEO as well?
Yeah, definitely. So Mary Haynes, like I met her 3 years ago. She's out of Ottawa. Again, Google guidelines. Everything is all about making sure that they provide the best websites for the given user at that given time, right? Yes, they take into account all the cookies, cache history. They store all the information, the queries, and even knows what sites you could go on, right, to provide ads ultimately. For in terms of Google, you don't know how Google's algorithm works, right? But we can only guesstimate based on the history and the search queries that actually come out as a result of whatever you type in. So yes, expertise, trust flow, authority links, everything plays, and we don't know the factors in terms of strength and even percentage wise, right? But if you're doing everything white hat, best practice, and based on what you see on historic data, it usually is predictable data as well, based on the results and the outcome on your history and your clients, right? Like usually I look at your process, if you had good proven track record already and it's specific niche or specific service, specific country, you kind of know and can judge based on what went on and how they came about getting it. Even on a competitive analysis relative basis, right? You can actually sniff through a lot of information to figure out what the journey was. So we do a lot of like back end strategy and consulting before we actually deploy and put together a campaign, because with all the insights out there, you get a better picture. And as long as you do a lot more planning, it gives you a better leg ahead. Even though you're still going to do a lot of A/B testing, you're going to have to annotate a lot of things just to pinpoint exactly what happens at a certain time to see what the shifts are. But that's SEO, right? Like nothing is a standalone, set it, done it, forget it. Everything's changing, and it's an evolving space because you don't know what your competitors are doing on a daily basis, what other SEO agents are doing. So you're competing all the time. But as long as you're focused on the end goal, whatever that customer wants, right, and wants to be known for, and you hit their KPIs or you do the best you can. Like honestly, I'm very authentic and very honest. I'm like, look, what you get with most SEO agencies is their best effort. And if they're in with the right reasons, like you are in alignment, you build a good relationship, and they actually want to help you grow your business, then they're going to do the best job they can possibly do for you, right? That's all they can do. And hopefully that's good enough, but sometimes it's not, and it's okay.
Yeah, obviously the customer is definitely in the focus. You bring up an interesting point. Obviously, you don't want to know what your competitors are doing while you're working your SEO. And we found an additional level of complexity in users and users' expectations shifting over time. So I remember, for example, we had a client coming to us with a 70% ranking drop. And we analyzed his site, and essentially he still had this big full screen sliders on top where you had to scroll down, or there was even an arrow, you had to click on it. This sounds a little bit ridiculous today because we are not used to this, but it's only 2 or 3 years ago, right? Yeah. Where it was really trendy in many industries to have like a full screen video that took a while to load. People were loading for the loading button just to see this full screen video, etc. You couldn't do this at some point. So essentially his site lost for a large part because of those sliders he had on every single page of I don't know, like 500 pages or something like this. So users' expectations shift. So while we have SEO is a moving target. So we do our thing, competitors do their thing. Users suddenly decide to navigate from mobile phones rather than desktops, and everything changes again. Google adjusts all the time. Every day launches minor algorithm updates and then surprises us before Christmas with a Google Core update, which is always a big fun for the industry. And users just really change their behavior. So users change the way they search, they change their devices. Right now, the Apple Watch is not something necessarily I'm using for search, but maybe this changes over time, or they figure out how Siri can better search something on Google at some point, or maybe it's Bing. We're going to figure this out. But definitely SEO is a moving target. We need to stay on top of it. I've been doing this now for 20 years, I think, and we've seen everything. So when we started, we had people writing white text on white background because this helped you rank. It was really fun times. We had small sites creating hundreds and hundreds of links because it was just quantity, it wasn't quality. And thankfully, it's more challenging these days, but I'm really thankful that Google improved quite a bit and many things don't work anymore, because working today in SEO is much more fun. It's much more challenging, but much more fun than it was back then, where you just try to find a loophole in their system. They're smart enough to be able to value user experience, value quality, content quality, depth, etc. Really understand with their algorithms, bird and likes, what is really happening in the content. So I think it's definitely challenging, but it is part of the game. Ups and downs are part of the game. Obviously, from my point of view, I was always saying, first of all, no contracts. Everybody should be able to leave if they feel they're not getting the value from our clients. And the second one was full transparency. The same as I might be talking about what we do for some project on a podcast. I might be talking about this on a YouTube video, or tell you the client specifically or their team, etc. I think transparency is really key, because I think the SEO agency or industry got a little bit of bad light in the marketing field, just because too many people were taking advantage of clients' lack of knowledge, where they say, okay, you can sell the client whatever they want. They don't understand links, they don't understand content. And we were essentially going, even 15 years ago already, against the grain and saying, look, we are going to tell you everything. We are going to send you the link reports. We are going to send you what's happening. If you drop, you drop. We're not controlling everything. As you're saying, we make the best efforts possible and move this forward. Before we wrap this up, I would want to touch upon a point that is very interesting to me. And this is where local SEO essentially merges with general SEO. And what I mean by this is that even though I'm selling something on my website, maybe throughout the United States, I can still work, and this works really well for our clients. I can still work on a local level. For example, I can sell my sneakers in the entire world, but people might search for sneakers store Wyoming, and I can still target queries like this specifically. Do you have in your local SEO efforts any projects where you think such things are helpful or come up, or are you only working on local businesses with a very limited surrounding?
So majority of my clients are service-based, Google My Business, the map, local 3-pack, as well as landing page optimization for city-specific or neighborhood-specific. Yes, I have 20% that are more B2B, more e-com, or service, but more global. So for me, I find that with localized, just understanding user behavior, user journey, how consumers buy and purchase and decisions, they might not have the same budget as bigger brands. And that's where e-commerce comes into play. A lot of people are competing with the bigger, the Etsy's, Amazons, or, if it's a product play, and they need a competitive edge. So they go after localized, or they go after very hyper long targeted keywords or different variations, right? Semantic keywords or whatever it is, just to win over the more generic search queries that get a huge amount of volume. So as a business owner, you just have to look at the opportunities, the gaps, and where you want to compete, because you have limited budget. You don't have the same amount of money as some of these big, huge in-house big agencies or big brands that can afford, hundreds or a couple $1 million a month retainers, right? Versus you might have a couple thousands of dollars, right? Like you can't play, and you have to be realistic. And that's where benchmarking and, just being upfront with your customers at the beginning. It's like, look, you want this dream, you need to play in the big boys league and start investing with funding with VCs or something, right? So being realistic with people and let them realize who they're really competing with, because you have a competitive analysis and figure out like who their major competitors are before you give them and want to work with them. Because setting expectations are so critical in any partnership relationship that we bring on, because without that, very difficult to manage expectations once the months start progressing, because theirs is unrealistic most of the time. They want everything for nothing, and yesterday's result. Like they wanted things done yesterday. In reality, as you know, Google will index and crawl, even though you're paying them and you do so many things to initiate that crawl. It's not going to happen sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And for you, it's like, okay, it's finally moving the needle, but clients are impatient. They wanted things done yesterday, no matter what. And it's overall expectation managing. And we're more, understanding, we know a lot more because we're in the industry and we can read the reports with all the software. Most business owners don't even know how to read and then implement it. That's another thing too. As much as you buy a software, how do you transcribe it and really understand what the depth is, analyze it, and deploy it with actions that is a predictable result that will come out of it.
That's practice. Yeah, this is a few really good points here. So first of all, like you mentioned, obviously everybody has a limited budget. Usually, even big brands have their budgets they need to keep, and they probably spend 80% maybe or 70% on paid ads, and the rest maybe a little bit of SEO, a little bit of email marketing. But obviously we need to see what can we do with the budget. What I really tell our clients is pick your battles well. There are battles you're not going to win. I just remember a client I talked to, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a call and we got them to number 4 on page 1. And that was about it. Because on top they had Wikipedia, they had Britannica, and I think there was Amazon. Okay. So at some point you just say, okay, this is as far as it gets right now. I could now either spend months and months and months and months trying to get ahead. It might be Google launching an algorithm update and say, look, Britannica has very short, very superficial definitions here. Let's rank them behind you. And you might suddenly then jump to page 1 or position 1. But sometimes it's also where it's like, okay, this is as far as it gets because there are just big brands. Google obviously prefers big brands rather than a smaller one, even though it has relevancy in the space and has been around for a while. You have to pick your battles well and say, okay, with the limited budget I have, where can I allocate? And this is where the location pages very often we see working really well. Where it's like, I can't go for iPhone repairs in Sydney. It's just impossible. But maybe when I search for smaller neighborhoods or smaller towns around Sydney, there is a space for me for my iPhone repair shop where I can really rank actually. And I'm going to be the most relevant search result because hardly anybody, there are going to probably be 3 iPhone repair stores and mine is the only one doing SEO. So this is where very often we can shift attention. And this is also where I think people ignoring local SEO get it wrong when they have an online business. This was something we really very often hear where they say, okay, no, I'm not interested in local SEO. They don't go to local SEO conferences. They don't go check out local SEO courses because they say, look, I'm selling nationally or internationally. This is not something for me. But then when you break it down and say, look, many people search for your service or your business plus location, and you're offering it there and in 1,000 other locations. So local SEO at some point is a thing. We had a client who ended up opening virtual offices to have physical locations in many places because they saw such a strong impact from local searches. Even though they were an online business, they still saw a value in having those physical representations in those places because there were so many queries tied to those locations.
Yeah, I wanted to add like the KPI metric at the end as a customer, really uncover what they want. Is it ranking? Is it clicks? Or is it conversion, calls and actions, right? Downloads or inquiries. Once you determine what that metric is, focus on it. Everything else, because even if ranking is subpar, but it's generating good quality leads and conversions, that's ultimately the customer's decision to continue with you or not. If they feel momentum, then you're on the right track. But if it's just a data point of getting a ranking, that's superficial for most part, because even if it's a huge search volume that generates very low quality and very low, actions afterwards, who cares? Right? Most business owners I deal with, they care about top line revenue or profitability, bottom line, right? Everything else, superficial. It doesn't really matter to them.
They might care about being on top of their competitors. It's just an ego-based metric that's not related to any conversions or or anything. Obviously, one of the first thing when someone comes to us for an Erica consulting, the first call is always conversion focused. So we say, okay, what is it? How are you going to measure if I'm successful? And this is a really important part, because some people, first of all, either they don't have a conversion tracking. So they might just look at traffic, and when more traffic comes in, they get more calls or more inquiries, but they don't have a tracking behind it. So we want to make sure we make as many decisions based on numbers. So we start establishing the conversion tracking. Like, okay, how many people really click this trial sign up button, for example, on your site, or how many people really try to establish contact because they get to their contact page. Let's tie it to something, even if you don't get so many inquiries, because it might be a high ticket price. We still want to make sure we identify how many of 100 people come in and do something we really want them to do. So I think this is a great point. We very often, clients are more worried about ranking drops than actually conversion drops, because they check their rankings, but they don't count their conversions. I had a client asking me why the traffic dropped 15%. And it was because we both had decided before to take down, I think 10 or 15 URLs because they were not relevant, but he had forgotten about it and just saw this huge ranking drop. And then we checked out the conversion and said, look, you even won conversions in this time, right? So it's really hard. SEO is so tied to traffic. It's sometimes hard to grab people and drag them away from the traffic statistics and say, what is the number of conversions you get from the search channel, from the organic segment on Google? You can select this on top. And this is very often what really needs to move the needle. I want to just come back once more to the limited budget. And this is something where we try to bring across. SEO is obviously what we both really have identified to like, and what we enjoy, and where we focus on. But I'm also aware that SEO is just one thing. So I think it's one pillar below an entire strategy. So very often when people are not really sure what to do, we might be starting with them on Google Ads first, because they need some quick feedback. What could be terminology? Maybe they need to validate their offer still because they just started out, or they have only done Facebook ads, and at some point COVID hit and it stopped working. This happens quite a bit these days. So we try to establish that SEO is one pillar. It's not going to be the only pillar. It should not be the only pillar below an entire marketing strategy. But we do see that people apparently drag over their expectations in terms of speed from paid ads platforms, where you just hit the button, put $5 in it, or $3 like on Facebook. You hit promote, then 10,000 people are going to see your offer. They drag this over and say, okay, now today I'm going to pay you for SEO. Tomorrow you send me the reporting. Does this happen to you as well?
So I only do SEO. I actually don't take any other form. Like, I don't do digital marketing per se, like Google ads, social media ads, video production, all that stuff. The only two things we do is website design and SEO. The reason is I'm a true believer of yellow pages and those type of clients. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm brainwashed, but I've done a lot myself, and I only do it to test the market. I've done trade shows, radio, television, newspaper, anything localized, traditional, as well as digital, from social to Google ads to YouTube to email funnels, to you name it. I've done it. And then I track the quality of leads more than anything. I don't care about the clicks or the lead magnet, the hook and whatever. It's all about real lifetime value of a customer. Acquisition cost, as much as I get them and maybe it pays for itself, sometimes it never does. It's all about the lifetime quality lead that I get and nurture. And are they resonating with my values? Do they connect with me on a level that I really want to help them or not? And that's more important in terms of a proper SEO campaign. If you do that properly with any agency, yourself, anyone in the world, there's great companies out there. And if you resonate with people that really care and understand your values, understand your mission, understand who your ideal customer is, and able to nurture more of that, then you got a really, really successful SEO campaign. Everything else, like ads, yes. E-commerce, great. Product play, great. Influence marketing, great. But when it comes to service, small, medium-sized businesses, SEO is the bread and butter. And that's why I focus on this, because I know based on my experience and, hundreds of clients I work with, it's more best practice, right? Now I have real data to prove it. And until someone has that to back it up, it's hard for you to understand it. If you're trying to do it yourself, or an agency that specializes in e-commerce, your e-commerce data better than anyone. And that's different industries and niches, even within SEO, right?
Mm-hmm.
You play where you want to play, and there's a huge market for everyone to play in. It's just choose your battle, right? And I focus on this because I'm very passionate and I love my type of client.
Sounds good. We definitely have seen great success combining the two, local SEO and Google Ads, especially because one channel essentially could inform the other, and I could say, look, in paid ads, this really works really well. Let's build some content on a local level for SEO then, or also vice versa. Then based on the tools we use in SEO, we were informed about certain questions or keywords that then informed Google Ads. I want to really wrap this up. I'm really thankful for you for taking the time for this podcast. It was great to chat about local SEO. We've learned a lot. We have learned content in local SEO needs to be tied to the company values, to the values your clients represent, to the stage they're in. This is a very big thing, where you need a transactional search query where I search for the best or cheapest sneaker in Sydney is not the same as if I just type in sneakers and I'm completely disorientated or just want to have a general idea. So content really depends on the stage, on the buyer's journey. I think we agree on transparency being a must for SEO agencies to gain the trust, to really deserve the trust from the client, and also from an online business perspective. We talked about how local SEO can still be a very important part of your overall strategy, even if you're not selling or a typical local business. At the end of the day, we sell one-to-one. We want to be found by one individual person who is in their specific phase and needs to find a solution. If people want to know more about you, where could they get in touch with you, John?
So the website that my agency owns is localseosearch.ca. So we're based in Toronto, Canada. But again, we service clients throughout global as well. We have a podcast called Local SEO Today, just sharing journeys, and had some good guests on there. I just really want to resonate and connect with good people. I'm at a different stage. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've seen good and bad in a lot of people, business owners or individuals that want to, get something from you without, paying, right? You realize who's in it for the right reasons. And I just want to connect with good people, usually SEO people like yourself and different individuals, consultants, or agencies. We're here to help businesses, and they have to realize that. If they're ethical, of course, the white hat people. But there's also a lot of people that are fast tracking things, hacking, or figuring out like tactics and tricks and guaranteeing this and that. Well, there's no guarantee in life, let alone advertising, right? And you're leveraging a platform that you have no control over. So understanding, acknowledging what you're able to do, and working with people that resonate with you and your values. And that's the most important thing in terms of SEO or any business relationship as a whole. Just get a hold of good people, connect with them, and you're going to have way more happiness in life.
Thank you so much. Great closing phrase. John Vuong from Local SEO Today. Thank you so much for coming to this show. We'll definitely be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gert.
Bye-bye.